Alright, and so I left off at Lauren and Peter drove to the beach. They didn't even make it to 24, Peter said. 1 minute and you could just be dead. He reached for the top button of Lauren's shirt. Don't, she said. Peter got angry. We're still alive, Lauren. I love you and I thought you loved me. She was never going to get anything right. She put her head in her hands. I guess I don't know what love is. Okay? Peter, can we just go home? She sat at her bedroom window for a long time, elbows on the sill. The sky was a terrible fake color from the smog and city lights, dark starless gray with a pinkish glow. Just like that you could be dead. Peter had quickly gotten over his anger. Maybe he really did love her. Maybe he knew what love was about. What was the matter with her? There's a man waiting for you. She tried to imagine him into possibility. Someone with whom she would walk on hillsides and lie in meadows. Someone who would understand her completely. It was like trying to put a face on a shadow. The image hung as insubstantial as a smoke ring around her finger, dissolving at the touch. He'll get down on his knees and thank every man who's ever been your lover, Mr. Royer understood. Who's ever been your lover. Mr. Royer understood, but he was impossible, older than her father, an old man. Only their souls could meet. She would send him poetry. He would dedicate brilliant novels to her. It would be the truest love she'd ever find. When Peter finished his CO application, Lauren went with him to drop it off at the Draft Counseling Center at UCLA. It was a warm night. Afterward, they went across campus to the inverted fountain, where a lot of people were smoking and skinny dipping. Peter wanted to join them, but Lauren was shy, so they rolled up their pants and dangled their feet in the water, shared a joint that was going around, then walked on, leaving wet footprints on the anti-war slogans spray-painted on the walkways. Peter was happy and humming. Lauren was irritated. She didn't know what was wrong with her. She'd gotten her acceptance from Berkeley that week. Peter was going east. He was heartbroken to leave her, said he wished she was going with him. She said yes, but didn't mean it. Life was so weird. Sometimes she thought everything that happened was interesting only because it had never happened to her before. Other times she thought it was all just too intense. Sometimes she wished Peter were already gone. Sometimes she felt as if he had already left. They came to the top of a grassy slope. Let's roll, said Peter, who believed in spontaneity. Lauren tucked in her arms and went down, turning over and over in the wet grass until she stopped at the bottom beneath a large tree. Peter was beside her. He caught his breath and rolled on top of her. Continued on page 246. Lauren could feel his breath on her neck, his heart beating against her ribs, the dampness of the grass against her back. I love you, Lauren, he whispered. You're the only girl I've ever loved. Lauren nodded, hoping he would kiss her so she wouldn't have to answer. She looked at his face, pale in a frame of black tree branches tipped with stars, then closed her eyes as it came down toward her. Love, I'll tell you about love. Whatever it wasn't this. The school year came to an end. Seniors rented caps and gowns, decorated them with peace signs, signed yearbooks. A coalition from many social groups formed and, according to old custom, took over the lawn in front of the administration building and went berserk with toilet paper, garbage, and the shredded remnants of the past year's mimeographed sheets and classroom notes. Having a farewell dinner was Peter's idea. The two of them would cook for poor Mr. Royer, who had to eat alone without anyone to discuss literature with him over the dinner table. Lauren had never pictured Mr. Royer's house in great detail, but she'd had a vague image of a cottage hidden behind many trees, filled with leather-bound books and paintings. Mr. Royer lived in a duplex on a dead-end street behind or beneath the Santa Monica Freeway. The doorbell was broken, but he had seen them coming and opened the door before they could knock. "Welcome." He closed the door behind them. "I'll take these." He lifted the bag of groceries from Lauren's arms. "You sit down, my dear. I've got some nice white wine cooling in the kitchen, but why don't we start off with gin and tonic, Peter could give me a hand." Lauren stood in the living room. She tried to imagine Mr. Royer here alone, to fix on some detail that would make the house his in particular, but the room was small, dark, and drab. The lampshades were crooked and the end tables scratched. There were a fireplace and a very faded oriental rug. There was a great number of books, some their titles stamped in gold leaf, which looked very old, newer looking paperbacks. One new hardcover. Lauren took it off the shelf. It was The Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse. There was an inscription on the flyleaf: "To another lone proud wolf of the steppes, all my love, Charlemagne." What a ridiculous name. She thought there had been a Charlemagne a class or two ahead of her in school. She heard the sound of ice cubes rattling, jumped, and replaced the book. Peter and Mr. Royer came back with filled tall glasses. "To the future," Mr. Royer said. Lauren hoped she would be able to get the drink down. She had never been a drinker. Peter hadn't been since his last beer bomb out with the track team. The feeling around school had been anti-alcohol. Smoking dope was cool, drinking was something only uptight adults did, and it made them loose, sloppy, stupid, and out of control. But to turn a drink down would be rude, and even though Mr. Royer was one of them, he was still a teacher. To bring out a joint in his house would definitely be too bizarre. But the gin and tonics tasted good. They went down easily. They drank several and made many toasts. Alcohol had an unnecessarily bad reputation. Lauren decided it was different from grass, but pretty pleasant. When you were stoned, everything was slow, except for thoughts and revelations flashing so fast and deep in your head you could never get hold of them. But this was all blurry brightness, loud and hot. Thoughts skimmed along the surface of her mind, then leaped into her mouth, and she was saying them whether she meant to or not. She saw herself putting food on the table in the kitchen and marveled at how well her body was performing. Mr. Royer praised everything. They toasted again with the well-chilled white wine. "To your graduation," he said. to Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, and to my own humble novel, which I have got to finish this summer. Lauren looked at him as he sat, wine-glass raised, shoulders hunched, eyes watching her intently. The first man to see her. Whatever else happened to her, she would never forget him. Peter drank half his glass of wine, then stood up suddenly. "I have to lie down now," he said, staggered to the living room and fell on the couch. "Peter?" Lauren followed him. "Leave me alone." He pulled a pillow over his face. Lauren looked at him for a moment and waited, but he didn't move. She went back into the kitchen where Mr. Royer was still sitting at the table and began to stack the dinner plates in the sink. "I'll just rinse these," she said. "Leave them," said Mr. Royer. "Stop it." He came up behind her, turned off the water, and took her wet hand. "There's something I want to show you." He led her down a short hallway and opened a door. Lauren peered into a dark room. "Do you know what this is?" She shook her head. "It's my bedroom." Lauren said nothing. She could see the pillows now, white squares in the dimness. "Do you know what I really want to do right now? Take you in there and make love to you." Oh, Silence. Are you shocked? You shouldn't be. You see, I'm in love with you. I have been for some time. But you knew that, didn't you? She didn't answer. "I'm talking about something very special. If it was just sex I wanted, I could find it in any bar. But we understand each other. Don't we, Lauren? You have a soul, and that's so rare. It would be beautiful. We'd have something to talk about in bed. Don't you see?" Nothing was happening anywhere in the world outside this hallway. Lauren tried to think through the fur that had wrapped itself around her brain. "I don't know anything." "You know." He held her by the shoulders. "You're a woman. I saw it in your poems. You've got fire, passion. You deserve more than all these boys around you. High school." He turned her to face him and kissed her. His tongue felt no different from Peter's, but the taste of gin, the sharp stubble of his cheeks, the smell of aftershave, starched shirt, sweat. This was someone different, older. He was 50, older than her father, old. His hands moved up and down her back. "This is the first time," he whispered against her hair, "that an event exceeded the anticipation." He was pressing against her, hips moving from side to side. He was hard against her thigh. The sweet smell of gin like perfume all around. The plaster wall of the hallway was against her back, and she stood rigid as he touched her. What was she supposed to do? This was Mr. Royer. Mr. Continued on page 248. This was Mr. Royer. "You have the most beautiful breasts I've ever seen," he said, his hands stroking. Well, this is, as I was talking about before, a real long story or magazine article. So I will amazingly continue reading this. It's a real long story, real long article, or romance novel and stuff. Almost a romance novel, like a short version one. But since it's so long, I will continue. I'll just stop here and continue reading this next time.